Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. Today we are going to make this cool drone animation and I really hope you will enjoy this one, and if you do, don't forget to leave that like, it will really help the channel. And if you're new to the world of 3D and Blender and you want to learn in the most streamlined and effective way, be sure to check out my courses. I carefully designed them to take you from beginner stuff all the way to full character illustration in the shortest time possible. So if you're interested in something like that, go check out the link in the description. Now let's jump right into empty Blender file, and first of all let me just select the light and the default cube, press X and delete, we don't need them, and we'll leave the camera in place. And let's press Shift A and we'll start with the plane. Now let's tab into the edit mode and let's press S and scale it down tiny bit like this, and then S then Y to scale it on Y axis. And I want to create a really simple drone shape, so let's press E to extrude. And now let's press Ctrl R and increase the number of cuts with the mouse wheel to something like 3. That should be enough. Now right click to release. And let's look from the side by pressing 3 on a numpad and press G to move it like this. Now we can enable X-ray view right here and select these vertices and press G and move them. I want, like a really dynamic shape here. And now let's select these verts, press G and move them like this, and these as well. And now we can press Ctrl R and create the cut in the middle, right click to release. Now let's press Ctrl R and create one more cut right here. Alt click this loop and hold Shift additionally to select the other one as well. Press S then X to scale it on X axis like this. And now let's press Ctrl R to create one more loop cut right here. So we have some supporting edge there. Tab out and let's press Ctrl 2 to add that subdivision modifier right here, as you can see. And additionally we can tab back in. Let's go for edge select by pressing 2, select this edge and press G twice to slide it back, and we can do the same here. So this will be the basic shape for the drone. So now let's tab out and we can shift and right click here to move the cursor. Let's press Shift A and we'll add a cylinder here, and let's modify the number of vertices to something like 24. This should be enough. And now tab into the edit mode, press S and scale it down like this, maybe a little bit larger. And now press S then Shift Z to scale it up, so we'll create like an opening here. Now tab out and in the modifiers tab let's add a mirror modifier, and let's select the drone body as a mirror object. And now let's additionally choose Y as an axis for mirroring, so we have 4 of those right now. And now we can right click, shade smooth, hold Shift and select the drone body. And before you do the next step, make sure you have the bool tool active, and if you don't, let's go to the edit preferences and in the add-on section just search for bool and check the bool tool add-on right here. You can then close the preferences and press Ctrl and minus on a numpad to create that cut. Now select the body, and this is still shaded flat, so right click, but instead of smooth we'll choose auto smooth because I want these cutouts to be sharp. So we can now turn off the X-ray view, and we left the cursor right where it was, so we can continue building these like propeller legs. So let's press Shift A and we'll add another cylinder, but this time let's make it 12 vertices and tab into the edit mode, press S then scale it down like this, maybe make it larger, so S then Shift Z on X and Y axis just like that. And now let's go for face select by pressing 3, click here and hold Ctrl to select all of these faces, and now press E to extrude. Now let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad, press S then X and 0 on a numpad to make it aligned, and now press S to scale it down tiny bit. Let's hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it here, tab out, and let's press Shift A and we'll add another cylinder here, and this time we can go back to 24 vertices, press S and scale it down just like this. And now let's scale it on X and Y plane again, and maybe make it a little bit lower by pressing S then Z. Okay, and now let's go for face select again, select the top face and hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now we are going to create those propellers, so let's tab out, let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle here. Now let's modify this to 12, tab into the edit mode and scale it down just like this. Now press F to fill and E to extrude. Let's zoom in a little bit, And now I will select these two faces right here, and let's press E to extrude. Now we'll need to watch our width here, so we don't want it to go, you know, larger, so it doesn't like hit the body. So something like this should be okay, and we can now press S then Z to scale it down on Z axis, you know, make it more thin towards the end. Now let's press Ctrl R and create a cut right here, and one more right there. Let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad again, and let's enable that X-ray view. Press 1 for vertex select some of these verts, press G, and you know, move them like this so we get this nice propeller shape, maybe something like this even. Okay, just to make sure we have the normals correct, press A to select all and Shift N to recalculate normals, tab out, and we can press Alt D, right click to release, press G then Z, move it up, and now press R for rotation, Z for Z axis, and 180 for 180 degrees, and confirm with enter. And we can now check the size, and you can see it's a little bit longer as it's supposed to be, so we can hold Shift, select the other one as well, and press S to scale it down a little bit. We can, you know, check it from the top view like this, and I guess this will work just fine. And additionally, we can now press Ctrl 2 to add the subdivision modifier for both of those, and now select one of them, tab into the edit mode, and we'll add some additional supporting loop right here to make this part a little bit more sharp, something like this. I will now tab out, and of course you can just go ahead and, you know, do some rotations here and there to, you know, if you want the propeller to be a little bit more realistic, but I will leave it like this. I don't care at this moment about that. So let's press Shift A and we'll add another circle right here to create an additional detail. So press tab into the edit mode, scale this down, press F and E to extrude, and now Ctrl B to bevel. And now let's tab out and we'll move this up so there'll be like a little screw or something, and we can maybe make these go a little bit closer. Okay, now let's finish the design so we can exit the X-ray view. And for some of those objects, we'll just use the bevel modifier. So let's select this one, for example, and let's add the bevel modifier. Let's reduce the amount. Let's add one more segment here, right click and shade auto smooth. And we'll go 180 degrees for the auto smooth. And now let's select these two by holding Shift with this one as last, and click here, copy to select it to move, you know, that bevel modifier to these other objects. Now let's select those, right click and shade auto smooth, same as before. Now here we want to modify the amount to something lower, and additionally, since it's only 12 segments, we want to increase the angle to something like 40, and here as well. Okay, and let's make sure these are shaded smooth, and basically that's it. So first of all, let's select these three objects and parent them to the cylinder with Ctrl P and object. And now let's select that cylinder, parent it to the arm, Ctrl P and parent the object. And now we can just select the arm, press R, Z, and -45 to rotate this 45 degrees. And now we can just go ahead and add mirror modifier here as well. Let's use the eyedropper tool to select the body of the drone as a mirroring object, and let's enable Y. And now we'll additionally hold Shift, select all of these, and this should be still in yellow as an active object, so we can just go ahead and transfer that mirror modifier to these other objects as well. So we have a quick drone like this, and to finish we can select these arms, select the boolean cutout object and the body as last, press Ctrl P and parent to object. So now we are able to move the whole thing. So let's hold Shift S and snap cursor to world origin, and we are prepared for some small animation. So first of all, let's expand the timeline a little bit, and I want to select one of the propellers, and on the frame 1 let's hit N for a side panel. Let's go to the item menu, and on the Z rotation let's right click and insert single keyframe, and let's hit Ctrl Tab hovering over the timeline so we switch to the graph editor. Now let's locate our track, it's right here, the Z rotation, and let's go to the modifiers panel here. If you don't see it here, you can just use N to open that side panel here as well. And now let's add the generator modifier that will basically just add the value to our rotation as the time goes, but I want to choose the additive here, and additionally I want to increase multiplier to something like 2. so it spins a little bit faster. And now I want to transfer that animation to the other one, so let's select the other one, hold shift, select the first one, press Ctrl L and link animation data, but that will make them spin at the same angle. So right now I want to separate it again, so let's select the other one and go object, relations, and make single user object animation. So now they are separated and we can edit their keyframes. So let's select that keyframe right here. So let's go to the F-curve menu here, and at the keyframe 1, let's enter value of 180 degrees. So that will shift it like that, and we have them now spinning the same way. Okay, so that's for the propeller spin, and now we are able to manipulate this, and it will still spin the same direction because it spins on the local z-axis. So let's press 0 on a numpad to go for camera view, and let's block out our animation. So I will Ctrl Tab here in the graph editor to go back to the timeline. And first of all, let's set the animation length to something like 140. And in the output settings, let's change this to 30 FPS. And now let's go to the frame like 20, and let's press I and insert location and rotation. That will create basically our first set of keyframes on the frame 20. Because I want the drone to kind of fly into the scene. That's why I created the default location on 000 at frame 20. And now we can just go back to the frame 1 and let's enable the recording here. That will create an auto keyframes for us. And let's press G then Y and move this back like this. And you can see the keyframes are created and this is now moving. So we'll be blocking out our movement just like that. So the drone will fly in and kind of stay in the place. I want it to move it around a little bit. So first of all, let me select this set of keyframes and let's press Shift D and duplicate it, I don't know, towards the frame like 35. I want it to stay in place a little bit, but then I want to move it from side to side a little bit. So let's go to frame like 50 and let's just move it here, then a little bit back, and then it will return. So you can just press Alt G here to reset and it will create those keyframes for you. And then it will kind of accelerate and go away. This is a little bit too fast. So first of all, let's move this all the way to frame 30 and let's make these distances a little bit wider. And now it will kind of just fly away like this. So this is our basic animation blockout, and this is really ugly and rigid, so we'll need to make it a little bit more fluid, a little bit more interesting. So first of all, we'll introduce some rotations into this. So there are already rotations in these keyframes because the auto keyframing will create the rotation and location and scale for you. So right now we can just press R then X on the frame 1 and rotate the drone like this, and it will kind of just fly in. But here, before it hits the middle of the scene, I want it to have opposite rotation. So let's press R then X and rotate like that. So it will create this little jump. And let's now check the graph editor. So I will again press Ctrl Tab here in the timeline, and as you can see, even if you zoom out, these values and animations are all over the place. So you can select all by pressing A and press period on a numpad to zoom on them. But as you can see, some of these values are too small as opposed to the other ones, and that's mostly because the rotation is in degrees. So you can have like a really large values there, like 180 degrees, for example, but the movement is in meters. So you will have like 2 or 5 meters of movement versus the 180 degrees. And that's why we have this normalize function right here. And basically when you click it, it will kind of normalize all of these values from 0 to 1. So it's like a virtual representation of those, graph curves. And let's now hit period on a numpad again, and this is now more easy to make sense of. And let's expand this list on the left, and let's just click some of these channels that we are not using and press X to delete them. specifically the scale values, but then again we are not using the Z rotation, so let's get rid of it, and we will use the Y rotation and X rotation. And basically the Z location is a little bit specific because I don't want to animate this manually. I want to create like a little jiggly movement there for the drone. So let's just disable everything here. Here you can turn off the visibility of these channels, and let's just enable Z location, and we can just select all of these keyframes, press X and delete them. Just one note here, let's press Ctrl Tab to go back, and let's disable the auto keyframing. We left it on, which might possibly create some problems later, so make sure you have it off, and let's Ctrl Tab back again here. And now we have only one keyframe on the Z location, and let's go to the modifiers panel here and let's insert some noise, and we'll increase the scale here so it's not so jumpy, and we'll reduce the strength to something like 0.1, 0.2, something like that. And of course let's restrict the frame range because I want this to loop, so let's hit 1 and 140 as the frame end, and let's do some blending, like 15 frames of blending. And now you can see it kind of goes up and down a little bit, and maybe we can make the scale a little bit lower, but I don't want it to be so hectic, so let's try something like 15, and we'll see how that works later. So we have some movement here, but the movement from side to side is a little bit rigid. So now let's hide this and let's show the Y rotation. So we want the drone to make a subtle rotation, and here where it slides on the left, I want this to tilt a little bit and then go back, so it will tilt to the other side as well. Now you might notice how this is all jumpy. That's because it's normalized, so it will always normalize to -1 and 1. So anytime you make adjustment, it will kind of just frame the whole animation from -1 to 1. You just need to get used to it, but it's really beneficial to be able to see the whole curve at all times and being able to compare it to the other curves. So let's shift this even more so it tilts. And here it should kind of tilt to the other side as well. So let's press Shift D and create one on the other side. And this can go a little bit higher as well. So we have that movement. Now this can go a little bit wider here. And yeah, we can make this a little bit longer. Okay, let's leave it like this for a second, and now let's show the X rotation. And you can see there's no rotation happening, only the one we did in the beginning, like this. So here we can maybe damp this a little bit, maybe introduce, some movement here and there. And now when it starts to accelerate, I want it to rotate towards the front. So let's press Shift D and duplicate this keyframe and create an animation like this, so it kind of prepares for that forward thrust. And now let's shift these two a little bit back. Okay, I really like the sudden movements and the speed of the animation. The drone movements look really choppy and hectic, so it kind of looks like there is some stabilization happening, and that this is a device capable of doing like a quick movements and quick changes. So basically now it's all about like enabling all of these tracks and trying to smooth out these animations a little bit. So basically you can just go around this and try to find things that you don't like, where the movement is either too sudden and unexpected, or the rotation doesn't kind of match the movement of the drone. So you can try to fix some of these things. For example, here it should be already rotated to the other side when it kind of goes back. So we can try to look at the Y rotation again, even go back a little bit. Okay, I think this is kind of okay. And of course, you will find a lot of places where some of these curves will need some smoothing out and some, you know, time adjustments. So yeah, it's basically about just going frame by frame, playing the animation over and over and trying to find, you know, the movements that kind of match your intent. But I think for the purpose of this tutorial, this is quite okay. So we can now zoom out a little bit and let's create a little bit of an animation on the camera as well. So let's select the camera, go to the frame 1 and we'll press I and insert location. Now let's hit Ctrl Tab and let's duplicate this keyframe set by pressing Shift D and move it to the other side. We want to have the same camera position at the end of the animation because of the looping. And now we can just crop this to like frame 20. Let's enable the auto keyframing and let's press G and move the camera slightly around. Now move it again and create like these subtle animations, and that will add a little bit to, you know, that action feeling of the shot, and it will kind of feel like a handheld camera. Okay, that's quite fine. So let's press Shift A and let's add some background. Tab into the edit mode, press S and scale this plane as much as possible. Tab out and we'll move it down a little bit. So let's press G then Z and move it down. Now let's go back to the camera view and let's set up some rendering. So we can collapse this animation timeline, go to the render settings, and for the EV preview, let's enable ambient occlusion, bloom and screen space reflections for some nice previews. And now let's switch to cycles. I will enable GPU and some denoising, and I will change the tiling here in the performance to 512. And for the samples, for the animation like this, I will go like 128. This should be enough. And now press Ctrl B to limit our render preview only for the camera bounce. And now let's add our first light. So let's press Shift A and we'll add an area light. And press G then Z and move it up slightly. Now we can hold period on the keyboard, switch to 3D cursor and press R then X and 45 degrees and additionally minus to go to the opposite direction. Let's confirm with enter, and then we can press R then Z to rotate it around. I want to, you know, create a light that is opposite to the camera to create some nice backlight. Maybe we can make it larger, and in the light settings let's change this to disk and let's set something strong like 1500 for the power. And let's now hold Z and preview the render. Now we can press G then Z twice to move the light away a little bit. So this will serve as a basic light for our scene. And now let's set up some materials. So first of all, I will select the background and create a new material and choose some color, something like a really light blue or something. That should be okay, maybe not so bright. And let's increase the roughness a little bit. Should be fine. And now let's select the drone and we'll create a new material. I will leave it white and set the roughness to almost 0. I want this to be nice and glossy. And now let's select the arm and let's create a little bit darker, like a dark plastic material. And now for these parts here, I want the same white material, same for the screw here. And let's set these propellers even darker. So create a new material and let's set them almost black, just like that. And now we can make the lighting a little bit better. So let's select this area light, press Shift D to duplicate and R then Z to rotate it to other side, and R and X twice to, you know, rotate it on the local X axis, so you can bring it down like this and create a light that goes, you know, from a lower angle and creates reflections like this. And additionally, you know, you can change the color of the light to something different, maybe a little bit blue, like that. And let's make this a little bit weaker, like 750. I don't want it to be so dominant. And now I will Shift D and RZ and rotate this to other side like this. But here I will press Alt R and create a top down light that I can move around like this and create some interesting reflections, maybe make it larger. And this way I'm able to kind of bring the light from the side, but not directly. So it kind of creates this really soft fall of light and these additional reflections. And I will use another one of these top-down lights and move it back here and make it really strong, like 3000 or maybe even higher. We'll see about that, to kind of create a light on the background there. And let's make this one a little bit warmer. Okay, and here we can increase the roughness on the background even more and make it maybe a little bit more saturated, like this. And now let's go to the world settings and let's fill some of those shadows with a little bit of a blue tone. It will kind of blend the scene together nicely. And let's go to the render settings, and in the color management we can choose higher contrast look and play, you know, with the exposure. And additionally, to make this more cinematic, we can select the camera and choose some depth of field. Let's go really low here, something like 0.2, so we can see the difference. And we can shift the distance around, you know, to make this focused on the drone body there. So for me, it's something like 9.8, and I'm looking mostly at this part right here until I can see that it's sharp, you know. Okay, something like that. And to make the scene a little bit more interesting, I've added some of these abstract elements. So let me just add a plane here, move it down, tab into the edit mode and extrude, and I will just move this around. And let's give this the same material as the background. And this will kind of just create some interesting detail and basically give the scene a little bit more depth. And this will kind of separate the drone from that background even more with the depth of field. So, you know, let me add some spheres here as well. So a few abstract elements here and there. And you can see how they're really out of the depth of field, and really it makes the drone stand out more. So now basically it's all about just going to the output settings, choose your folder right here, and then just switch from PNG to FFmpeg. And for the encoding, you can choose MP4 as a container. And one of the most important things for this animation to look great, since we have some rotating propellers, is a motion blur. So make sure you go to the render settings, locate your motion blur and activate it, and it will create a nice blur effect on your rotating propellers, and it will really make the difference. Even with the moving drone, that motion blur is really something you need to make this look more real and more cinematic, even if it's stylized. And now just go render animation, wait for your frames to finish, and you will have your animation ready. So that's it for today's animation, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. And if you did, again, please don't forget to leave that like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.